In this video, we're going to take a look at storyboarding, and we're going to have a quick demo of a storyboarding tool, which is Invision in this case. So why do we want to storyboard? Storyboard helps us to communicate our ideas with both technical and non-technical users. So we can make sure that we all understand what we're going to get when we finish our story or when we finish our feature. It helps to make sure that we are working on the right tasks. One big thing is it helps us to consolidate screens as well. And this is a major reason why I use storyboards this early into the term. Because a lot of times people want to jump in and start writing code. But a lot of times if I take a look at a design document and I see a storyboard with maybe 14 screens, I can give some guidance and say, that's far too many clicks, far too much click depth. Think about how to simplify your program, and that's going to make your life easier because it's less work that you have to do. So, an example, sometimes I'll see a screen that links to a search screen, and all that's on that search screen is maybe a search text area and a search button. You'll click the button, and then you go to a result screen. You'll click on the result, and then you go all the way back to the first screen. Many times this can be consolidated all in one. You can just have a search bar at the top of your application, and anytime the user searches, have it fill in with results. So you can really consolidate screens like that and save yourself time. So, save time, measure click depth, and as we like to say, measure twice, cut once. So with a good prototyping app like Invision and with Fluid UI and several others out there, you can have something that really looks like a live app that you can test out in front of users and make sure that your usability assumptions are correct. So what are some good storyboard tools? Well, there's good old PowerPoint if you just want to throw some things together. And that works well enough for communicating an idea. Probably would work well for our class as well if you just want to show what things look like. There are a couple other tools that are really meant for storyboarding. One is called Fluid UI, and I used that exclusively up until recently. I actually used it for quite a long time. Still definitely something you can use. When I started using it, it had more of an open model, and then it went to more of a commercial model. And it said you could only have something like, I think, one free project. In the older model, I had like 6 projects in there, and so I kind of got into a funky situation where I'd have to delete stuff to go back and use it again. So definitely usable. I have a video that covers Fluid UI if you want to look at that. But the one I'm going to take a look at in this video is one called Invision, which is used very frequently by UX designers and other user experience professionals. I have gotten a free student account for everybody in this class. I will post the code up on our learning module, but nonetheless, when you get that validation code, you can come to this page, which I'll also put in our learning module announcement. Just put in your validation code, which I provide to you, all of the other information, and then get started, and then that will allow you to download Invision. With our educational account, you have a license which includes unlimited collaborators and unlimited prototypes, and this license is good from now until 6 months after you graduate. So you don't have to use Invision, can use Fluid UI, PowerPoint, something like that. But if you're interested in using Invision, this is a great way to get in. Now when you start up Invision, this little wizard appears, and you see it has different canvas sizes depending on what you want to do. So for a mobile device, if you click under iPhone, you'll see there's both iPhone and Android devices. For the tablet, again, several different tablet variations. Blank canvas if you're not sure. If you want to do a web page, choose web, and we can go ahead and choose web just like so. Give it a few moments to start up. And one thing that you'll notice, first of all, is there's something that's called an artboard. An artboard can represent a single screen or a state of a single screen. Nowadays, we have a lot of screens that can do multiple things as we try to minimize click depths for our users. So you might have a screen, if you think about Facebook, when you edit something and when you read something, you're essentially on the same screen. So you would have a different artboard for maybe adding a new comment, a different artboard for editing a comment, and maybe a different artboard for liking or reading or something like that. The next thing that you notice is that you kind of expect to have a bunch of widgets here, but we don't necessarily have a bunch of widgets. So I'm going to go to Tools, and I'm going to say Rectangle, and up at the top of this, I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of a header, just like so. And we can give it a color. I might choose something like Plant Places green color. I can just choose a normal green color just like so. And then within this I can go Tools, and then I can say Text, and I can say My Plant Diary or something like that, and I can center this text so that it looks how I want it to look. Maybe we'll stretch it out a little bit. Maybe we can bump up the font a bit. We'll make that maybe a 26-point font. You see that gets a little bit bigger. And once again, we can change the color on this guy as well. And for that, I simply navigate down here to fills, and I can choose again maybe kind of a creamish yellow color, just like that. It's also common for us to put some kind of search text inside of a title bar that we're going to reuse across an application. So I can come up to Tools and I can say maybe we'll do a rounded rectangle this time, do something like so, and then bring it up here. And a lot of times in web user interfaces and in mobile user interfaces alike, many times we'll put what's called a hint or a placeholder into a user interface component, and that will be something like enter a plant name to search. Now that's probably way too big, at least the font is way too big, so I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to take the font down maybe to a 14 point, and then I'm going to take the text and delicately place it inside of the search bar. So this is a common header that you'll see on web pages today, where before you'd have a separate search screen and a separate results screen, so on and so forth. You see here on the Live Plant Places web, this is the kind of look and feel I'm going for, where you have a search button up here, and as soon as I start typing, watch what happens to that text. You see my typed text is a bit darker, and it leads to an autocomplete, where when I haven't typed anything in there, there's a little label that tells me what to do, and this is essentially consolidating what would be two different components, a label and a text box, and making them one, simply a text box. Now, here's where the magic happens. Just like the real plant places, we're going to want to use this same kind of header across multiple pages, and so we want to make a component about this, something that is reusable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this entire unit, and I'm going to click this Create Component, and we're going to call this Plant Diary Header, something like so, and then choose Done. Now here it gives me a little option to preview what I've created. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And the handy thing is, if I change this component in one place, it changes universally. So it's a nice way to make a reusable component. I go ahead and I choose Done, just like so. Now you see Plant Diary Header. Do you see how that is a component that we can see here? Now let's go ahead and make a brand new artboard. First I zoom out a little bit so we can see all this on one page. Now I'm going to go to Tools and Artboard, just like so, and we're going to call this one Web Large, which in hindsight looks like that one might be a little bit bigger than the one we did before. So let's do Web Medium. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now take a look under Libraries and Document. And under Libraries and Document, you'll see Component appears here. And there's our Plant Diary header, and you see I can line it up just like so, and I probably should have had that gone the full width, but nonetheless, line it up just like so, and now you can see that we have two different artboards. We have two different artboards with a nearly identical look and feel because they both have that same My Plant Diary going across the top. So that's how to create a component. As a matter of fact, creating components is one of the ways that Invision is really useful to us because we have the opportunity to use component libraries that others have made for us. So I've come up with a few here, and I'll link them into our learning module. There's one on material design. There's one called Do, which has a bunch of free design resources. You see, just have a little download link here. I've already downloaded these just in prep for this video, but nonetheless, download it like so. There's Design Tools, which is a collection of different icons. So if you want to get a bunch of icons really quickly to put together an idea, you can just download this and then import it into Invision. Let's see how that import works. Now I've already imported Deck and Design Tools icon pack. Let me go ahead and choose Do, which is one we talked about. So I'm just going to go to the folder where I've downloaded it. I'm going to click Do UI Studio, and apologies if I didn't describe this before, but I started by hitting the plus there. And now I'm going to choose Open. Now, if we take a look at these, we'll see a little variety of things. The Do UI kit, that one's a little different than the others because you can right-click and say Open Document, and it essentially gives you some pre-canned themes, which are handy if you want some inspiration and you don't want the application to look too boxy. It kind of gives you a few good examples. So that's the do kit. Let's take a look at the others, because for our case they might be a little more simple if we're starting from the ground up. If we take a look at the design tools, we'll see that we have a bunch of icons. These are really handy because these days we don't like to put a lot of words on buttons. We like to put images. More people are going to understand images, and they're faster to comprehend than reading the text and trying to understand what it means. A disk icon, everybody knows that means save. A house icon means home, so on and so forth. So the design tools icon pack is really good for those commonly known icons. Now let's take a look at deck, and this one's handy as well. So if I scroll around, I will see there is a button large. I scoot my screen over a little bit so I can go back to the first screen, and I'm going to go ahead and drop this button large on that first screen's page. I'm going to click on this send text, and I'll tell you it's a little tricky to get right in there, but if you click enough, you can go in there and start typing something like submit, and there's a little bit of a lag, but sure enough it will eventually take the text that you put, which in our case is submit. So this might be on something like a search screen page. So we'll keep our submit button there, and then I'll just add a few more, let's say rounded rectangle, and we can have something like, we'll have like a plant name, and we'll do another rounded rectangle just like so. I guess we could probably just duplicate these, but something that indicates that we're putting things about a plant here. So we might have date planted. I could put in some, remember the trick that we use in mobile development, we call it a hint. In web development, we call it a placeholder. So here you see I have a placeholder called enter plant name to search. If we go up here, there's our placeholder, enter plant name to search. And again, as soon as I start typing, it starts auto-completing. So placeholder hint, depending on which paradigm you're using. We might as well go ahead and do that. If I say tools and then text, we could say something like, where is the plant? Something like so. So the idea is we're starting to think out what our application is going to look like. And of course I have a little bit of typing that's off there, but you get the idea. See if we can get this guy, and just like say, where is the plant? When was it planted? So on and so forth. When was it planted? Now you see the advantage of that hint or that placeholder is that it's embedding that label right inside that text area. In the old days, we probably would have put the label above or to the left, but there's one big problem with putting a label to the left of an input, and that is consider internationalization. With internationalization, you might have to translate your text into different languages, and those different languages might need different length of room. So it's considered not a good idea to put a label to the left of a component. You should put it either on top or just use the hint or placeholder text, which is even more common now, and make a simpler screen. Okay, so the idea is the user's going to fill all this information out, and we could go ahead and do one more. We could say who planted it, something like that. We can go ahead and think these things out. Now we have the submit button. Now for the submit button, I'm going to add an interaction, and that interaction is going to take me to the next page. So you see the interaction is that lightning bolt. So I simply drag from the component that's going to initiate the interaction over to the area where the interaction is going to happen. So we choose save, and maybe I can put some text on here that says plant saved. Obviously it'd be a bit bigger than this, but here again we're just trying to feel things out. Measure twice, cut once. When I take a look at design documents, a lot of times I'm looking for screens that can be removed because they're not needed, because that's taking your time. So really I'm trying to look at how to make you very efficient throughout this project. Now for my plant diary, maybe when we click there we go back to our first screen. So I can select, choose the lightning bolt again, and now essentially we have a round trip from our first screen to our second and back again. By the way, I wouldn't make a separate screen that says plant saved. In general, think about how you can make your application with as few screens as possible. Don't make one screen for search, one screen for search results. make it all a consolidated screen. So this is just a demonstration of how to go from one screen to another, but normally I wouldn't have one screen that has plant saved. I might do some type of notification or some type of pop-up to express that same idea. Now let's see how we can demo this. If I hit the little play button, it takes me into a preview mode. You see it started with my second screen, but I can click on the title, and I can see that I can go back to the first screen, and then the submit button is a bit off screen here, but if I hit submit, it takes me to the second screen, back and forth, so on and so forth, and we can see what's going on. So some handy ways that we can demo this. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can go ahead and say publish the prototype. So I'll say plant diary, and I'll choose publish. Okay, and now we click on this button here, and it's going to open up a web view, and this is a web view that I can share essentially. So you see kind of a nice look and feel of the things I typed in, even with the quirky mistypes that I had earlier. But we see we have a submit button, it goes to our save screen, and then we can go back. Let's take this URL, and I'm going to open it up in incognito so it doesn't know who I am. And let's see. Even without being logged in, notice that I can still use this prototype. So for your design document, a little URL like this would be adequate. One other thing that's really handy when you're doing a prototype like this is to run back to your screen designs and zoom out a little bit. If you see a whole bunch of screens here, maybe 12 screens, you probably have about 9 screens too many. So make sure that every screen is maximizing its use of all of its screen real estate, and that every screen is has a good purpose. Don't let any white space go to waste. Don't make the user make too many clicks. In other words, try to avoid a main menu screen. Try to avoid a splash screen. Try to put off logging in until you actually need to know who the user is. Let the user play around in your application a little bit in anonymous mode before prompting the user to log in. Because if you have the splash screen, you're wasting a bit of time unless you actually need to load something in the background. If you have the main menu screen, you're taking everything and giving it the same priority, and you're making the user make one additional click before getting to what the user actually wants. Think about why the user is going to get into your app and make that the first screen instead of a main menu screen. You can always have a menu across the top anyway, so don't bother with starting with the main menu screen. Login screen. Save that until you actually need to know who the user is, because most users want to play around with the app before they start giving away some confidential information. So the other thing is, if the login screen is your first screen, you might find you spend the better part of your project working on a login screen and not focusing on your core application. So focus on your core application first. Also, with the storyboard, I kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, but really do an inventory of your screens and make sure that you need them all. Give yourself a quiz. Are there any screens here I could consolidate into one? Am I doing something like this where I have a separate screen that shows a message, when really that could just be a pop-up on the main screen? This I said is bad practice, but in reality I would have something going on this screen. I just wanted to show navigation. So use this storyboard as a way to communicate your idea. Make sure you have all the right screens and not too many screens, and make sure that your product owner understands what you're going to be delivering, as well as the technical resources. The storyboard tends to be a golden nail that holds together the design that's in a designer's mind with the functionality that the programmers want to create. And if you start with the storyboard, you have an opportunity to have this conversation and make sure that everybody understands what everybody's going to be delivering. So I hope this video has been helpful, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.